Good morning. Welcome to another Theory Thursday. Today we are looking at chord extensions, how they're built, what they are, and how they're used on guitar. This tie was a gift, actually, so I don't have a link to it, and I don't know where it was bought. So I am wearing my Casio 230 GA, though, so you can see that. So, without further ado, let's go to the whiteboard. Good morning. Today we are talking about extensions, chord extensions. What the heck is it? How do they work? How do you find them and build them and all that good stuff? So up till now we've talked about triads, which are 3 notes. We've talked about 7 chords, which is 4 notes. Extensions is everything above it. So everything you're adding to the chords, whether it's on top of the chord or in the chord, which we'll talk about. So triads, we know, are 3-note chords. 7 chords are 4, and extensions are 5+. There are some caveats to that because sometimes you are replacing notes within a chord. So let's talk about this. When you get a piece of music and you see something like this, you know that that's a C chord. That's a C major triad. That's 3 notes. You see something like this, C7, and you know that's C with a flatted 7. That's 4 notes. The flat 7 would be B flat, okay? But what happens when you see something like this, C9? Now, what does that mean? What notes are we adding and which ones are we taking away? So let's start over. We'll spell out the C scale because that's where all of this starts. Knowing your major scales. C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Now I'm going to do another octave of this just so you can see how numbers present themselves here. F, G, A, B. Okay? So it's the same scale. It repeats itself. Now, we've talked about scale degrees and building chords off scale degrees, and so I'll number these out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and this is 8 or 1 because we start over again, okay? But if we keep going, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Okay, you can keep going like that, and you're probably getting the idea of where these extensions come from. So when we see a chord like this, C, you know it's the 1, it's the 3, and the 5. Okay, that's a C chord. So that would be C, E, G. 1, 3, 5. Okay, when you see a C7, you know that that's the same notes plus 1, 3, 5, 7, and a flat. So it's B flat. Now, if this were to say major 7, that would be the B natural. That. Which, however it's written, if it's just a regular 7, it's automatically a flat. Okay? Now, you see C9. If that's all it is, if it's just the number, okay, this is what it looks like. All the same, even the B flat. Okay? And then you just count it out. We're adding a D. So when you see a number that's bigger than 7, it assumes the 7 is still in there, the flat 7. Just like when you see C7, you're not taking away, and you're not taking away the G or the E, you're adding. It's called the extension because you're adding things, okay? So a C7, you're adding the B flat. A C9 is the same as the previous. You're adding the B flat, okay? Another common one, C13. Okay, now what would that be? It's assuming the previous notes, so technically C13 would be spelled C, E, G. There's your triad. It assumes the flat 7, okay? And it also assumes every other extension up to that note, okay? So we have our flat 7. 9 would be in here. We already have an E, right? We already have it covered, so we're not going to add that. 11 would be in here. And then we have a 12, the 5th. You wouldn't call it the 12 because it's already in the chord. And there's your 13, A. Okay, so how many notes is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 notes in a C13 chord. Okay, and this is how it would look on the, so there's your C, E, G, B, we'll do a flat because it's a B flat. There's your D, there's your F, and there's your A. So that would be a C13 chord. It's a lot of notes. Now, we're playing on guitar, and you only have 4 fingers to work with, plus whatever open strings you have. But if we're using shapes that we can move everywhere, you only have 4 fingers to work with. So what does that mean? We have to pick and choose what notes we need to use. Now, usually what happens, the most important notes of a chord, the 3rd, because that makes it sound either major or minor, right? That's a huge, huge difference if a chord is a major chord or a minor chord, right? So you need to have the 3rd in there. The flat 7, because that's what makes it dominant. That's what gives it that crunchy feeling. If it was a major 7, that'd be a totally different chord. Now, when we're on guitar, usually what happens is we take the farthest out extension. So in this case, we play an A. So there's 3 notes that we absolutely need, and then usually we play the root note. So that's usually how we form chords on the guitar when we're talking about extensions. Now, on guitar, like I said, you only have the 4 fingers. You can't stack everything up on top of each other like you're supposed to, like on piano. So when we get to extensions like this, let's take a look at some of the chord voicings. In perfect theory world, extensions always stack on top of each other, just like this. If you played a C7, the B flat would come last. If you played a C9, the D would come last. On top, it'd be the highest sounding pitch. All right, so for example, here's a C9. Okay? Now, this is an example of a chord that we can put the 9 on the very top. It's the highest note that we're going to play. So it's a 2 here, your 1 here, 3, and 4. This is the 3rd fret, just like it says. So I don't even need to put that. 2, 1, 3, 4. Now, what are the notes we're playing here? This becomes a C. This becomes an E, right? Root, 3rd. This is a B flat. There's your 7. Flat 7. And then your pinky is playing a D, which is your 9. Okay? So it's exactly, what did we take out? We took out the 5th. Took out the G because we don't really need it. And if we have to choose, we can take it out. Okay? So that's an example of where an extension on the guitar is correctly put. We're missing a G, but it's all in line. It's all stacked on top of each other. Now, let's take a look at a C13. Now, there's tons of ways you can play all these chords, right? These are not the only ways you can play these chords. But an easy one to look at. Here's an example of a chord shape where you would, the 13's not going to be on the very top. It's close, and you could make it so that it's, depending how you play it, you can make it on the very top. But you're going to bar. This is the 8th fret. Okay. Put your 3rd finger here. 2nd, and you could put 4 here. Okay, so what do we have here? Your bar, you're playing a C here. This is a G, it's the 5th. B flat, there's your 7. This is an E, your 3rd. This is a 13. Oops, I wrote the number instead of an A. And then this got a little crooked. This last string here is another C, as you're playing on the 8th fret. So, what are we playing here? The 1, the 5th, the flat 7, the 3rd, the 13th, and then the 1. So, there's an example where the 13th isn't on the very top. You could just not play the last string, and it would be. But you can see the 3rd and the 7th are flipped, and the 5th comes second instead of the 3rd, which it usually would. So there's an example. With our limited reach and fingers on the guitar, we need to make concessions like this. You'll also notice on, I don't want you to get this mixed up. That 1 isn't part of this chord. You'll also notice in a C13 chord, we also have an F and a D, and we're not playing that either because we just don't have the reach for it. We don't have the fingers for it. You're picking out the most important chords or notes of the chord, which would be the extension, the 3rd, the 7th, whether it's major or flatted, and if you can, put the root on there. It's kind of funny to say you can omit the root. Usually you don't, but you can, and it'll sound like it should. It's kind of funny to say that. But so those are extensions. Now, there are, sometimes you'll see chords that'll say C6, for example. All right. Now, how is that different? Now, if the number is above 7, it's an extension. You're adding notes on top of the chord. Right? If it's below 7, within this first octave here, you would be adding that note into the chord itself. So, for example, a 13 in the key of C is an A. A 6 in the key of C is an A. What's the difference between these two? This one assumes the flat 7, the 9, the 11. This one is just adding the A. Just adding the A. And it doesn't need to be on top either. So how would you play that here? C6. So I'll put it up here. C6, C, E, G, A. There's no flat 7. There's no 9, 11, whatever. So it's 1. Let me think here. There's your 4, 2, 3. I'm not playing this. Also, these I should probably mix out. This is a C6, and this is your 3rd fret, so there's no number here. What you might notice is this is a C chord. You take this off. There's your basic C chord. But as soon as you add this in, this is an A. Okay? Now you can move this shape if you don't play the open strings. You can move that wherever you want on the fretboard, just like you can move these. But what are we playing here? C, E, A, and another C. So what do we take out? The fifth. Because usually when we play a C chord, this G string is open. That's where the G comes in. But here, we're swapping it out. Now, technically, if you were on a piano, you would still play the G, but like I said, with our limited fingers, we just don't have the space to add it in there. But this is how it's technically written out. So that's the difference. If the number's above 7, it assumes everything that came before it. For example, the C13, you're getting all the notes that came before 13. So there's the 13, the 12 we already have, the 11 we add in, the 10 we already have as the 3, the 9 we add in, the C obviously we already have, and then the flat 7. If the number's below 7, you're just adding that note into the chord. Okay? So that's a quick, dirty way to look at it. There are some other caveats like add chords and like power chords. If it was a C5, that would just be C and G. There's no E. So just little rules like that, but we can go over that another time. This is the bulk of it, especially in jazz. You're looking at these extension chords mostly. See, and the 6th chord comes in. And actually, another chord that's really common is the 6-9. This is a special one, another special case where you're just adding the 6 and the 9. It doesn't assume the flat 7. So this would be C, E, G, 6, 9. There's no B flat in there. Okay, you're just adding those, even though the 9 is above 7, but that's a special case as well. But we can go into all the special cases and all that stuff in another video. This is enough information for today, I think. But just so you know, just to recap, extensions above 7, you're adding them on top, and they assume everything that came before it is in the chord. This is how they're written. They're stacked on top. However, on guitar, we have to pick and choose what notes go in. And the most important ones are the 3rd, the 7, the extension, and then the root, right? In that order. And as long as we have all of them on guitar, that's good enough. You don't need to make them all on top. Also depends on what melody is and where you're fitting in. Okay, so that's above 7. If it's below 7, you're just adding the note into whatever chord you're playing. For example, the C6 is a C triad plus the 6. Okay? And that's that. I think that's all. All right. Anyway, hopefully you learned something here, and we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.